The role of Greek oracles in the classical age, society, politics, and philosophy. Introduction. The Greek oracles, prominent during the time of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, were one of the most intriguing and influential institutions in ancient Greece. They were not merely religious centers, but played crucial roles in politics, social structure, and even philosophical thought. Oracles functioned as sacred intermediaries between the divine and the mortal, serving as places where individuals, city-states, and rulers could seek guidance on a wide range of matters, from personal decisions to political strategies. This essay will explore the nature of Greek oracles in the classical period, their organizational structure, the way they sustained themselves, their influence on society, politics, and philosophy, as well as how they were perceived by various segments of society. Furthermore, we will investigate the differences between oracles and temples, and how oracles impacted philosophical discourse, especially in the context of thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. The nature and structure of Greek oracles. The most famous oracle of the classical age was the Oracle of Delphi, dedicated to Apollo. It was believed that Apollo, the god of prophecy, spoke through the Pythia, the priestess who would deliver the oracular responses. Other notable oracles included those of Dodona, associated with Zeus, and Claros, associated with Apollo as well. These institutions were structured hierarchically, with the Pythia, or the oracle priestess, being at the top, surrounded by a group of priests who interpreted the divine messages and facilitated the consultations. Oracles were typically located at sacred sites, which often held historical or mythological significance. The structures usually consisted of the temple itself, which housed the god's image or symbol, a sacred area for sacrifices and offerings, and spaces for the consultation process. The Pythia, for example, would enter a trance-like state, often induced by inhaling vapors from a fissure in the earth, believed to be a channel to the divine, and her cryptic pronouncements would be interpreted by the priests. Sustaining themselves. Oracles were sustained primarily through offerings and donations. Pilgrims from across the Greek world brought sacrifices, treasures, and monetary gifts, either in gratitude for a previous prophecy or in hopes of receiving divine insight. City-states would also make significant contributions to the upkeep of oracles, seeking divine favor for their armies or political ventures. The prestige of a particular oracle often attracted significant wealth, which was used to maintain the site, conduct religious festivals, and support the priestly class. Local versus pan-Hellenic importance. The influence of oracles varied based on their prominence and the scope of their consultations. Some oracles, like Delphi, were considered pan-Hellenic, serving not just the local polis, but also city-states across the Greek world. Delphi, especially, held significant international sway, with consultations sought by rulers from as far as Lydia and Egypt. Other oracles, like those at Dodona or Claros, while still respected, often had more localized influence, catering primarily to their surrounding regions. The wider a city-state's political ambitions, the more it sought to consult the major oracles on important matters. For instance, before embarking on the Persian Wars, the Athenians famously consulted the oracle at Delphi, whose cryptic advice, "Trust in your wooden walls," shaped the naval strategy that ultimately helped them defeat the Persians. The public, rulers, and philosophers. Perception of oracles. The general public, rulers, and philosophers had varied relationships with oracles, often shaped by personal or political circumstances. 1. The public. For the average citizen, oracles were powerful religious institutions that provided access to divine will. Common people would seek personal guidance on matters ranging from marriage, health, and travel to business decisions. Because oracles were seen as the mouthpieces of the gods, their pronouncements were generally accepted with reverence, even if they were often cryptic or ambiguous. 2. Rulers. Greek rulers frequently consulted oracles on matters of state, particularly before wars or significant political decisions. The oracle's endorsement of a ruler's plans could provide a sense of legitimacy, especially in politically contentious situations. However, rulers often approached oracles with caution, as their cryptic messages could sometimes be interpreted in multiple ways, leading to different courses of action. The oracular response would often be used as propaganda to legitimize a political course of action already determined. 3. Philosophers. The relationship between philosophers and oracles was more complex. Socrates, for instance, famously spoke of the Delphic oracle's proclamation that no one was wiser than him, a statement that spurred his philosophical inquiry into the nature of wisdom. Yet, philosophers often approached oracular pronouncements with skepticism. Plato, for example, criticized the reliance on oracles for decision-making in his works, preferring rational deliberation and knowledge over divine insight. Aristotle, in particular, was critical of mystical practices, emphasizing empirical observation and logic over divine revelation. At the same time, philosophers recognized the cultural and political significance of oracles. While Plato might have rejected the irrational aspects of divination, he still saw value in the oracle's role within the polis as a unifying and stabilizing force. For many thinkers, oracles represented a form of traditional wisdom that, though flawed, was deeply embedded in Greek life. Oracles' view of society, rulers, and philosophers. The priests and priestesses who managed the oracles likely viewed themselves as crucial intermediaries between the divine and mortal realms. Their authority was rooted in a belief that they channeled the gods' will, and they likely saw their role as serving not just individual querents, but the broader interests of the community or state. In terms of their relationship with rulers, the oracles held a delicate position. On the one hand, they were revered as spiritual authorities, but on the other, they had to maintain a level of political neutrality to avoid alienating powerful city-states. Oracles would often give ambiguous or polyvalent responses to avoid being entangled in political conflicts. Their view of philosophers is harder to pin down, but it is likely that the oracular institutions were aware of the growing philosophical movements in Greece. However, because oracles were part of the religious status quo, they may have seen philosophers, particularly skeptics like Socrates, as a threat to their influence. Influence on society, politics, and philosophy, oracles were instrumental in shaping the political and social fabric of the Greek world. Their influence was often indirect, but still profound. 1. Political influence. The oracles, especially Delphi, played an essential role in legitimizing political decisions. In some cases, oracular prophecies even influenced the course of major historical events. For example, the Spartan decision to delay entering the Persian Wars was partly based on an unfavorable oracle. Additionally, the oracle at Delphi was a key player in the establishment of colonies, guiding city-states in selecting auspicious sites for new settlements. 2. Social influence. Oracles reinforced social hierarchies and traditional values by aligning their pronouncements with religious and cultural norms. The presence of oracular institutions also contributed to the cohesion of the Greek world, providing a shared religious framework that transcended the often fractious political relationships between city-states. 3. Philosophical influence. While philosophers often critiqued the oracles, they could not ignore their significance. Socrates' engagement with the Delphic oracle is a prime example of how oracular wisdom could spark philosophical reflection. In a broader sense, the tension between reason and divine revelation, as embodied by the oracles, became a central theme in Greek philosophy. Plato's emphasis on rational knowledge over divination can be seen as a response to the cultural dominance of oracular authority. Oracles versus temples. Key differences. While oracles were often housed in temples, they were distinct institutions with specific roles. A temple was primarily a place for worship and sacrifices, dedicated to a specific god or goddess, where rituals were conducted to honor the deity. Oracles, on the other hand, were centers of divination, where humans sought direct communication with the gods. The rituals in temples did not usually involve prophetic consultations, whereas oracles were explicitly designed to offer divine guidance through sacred intermediaries. In a sense, all oracles were temples, but not all temples were oracles. Conclusion. In the time of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, Greek oracles were central to both religious and political life. They offered divine counsel that influenced decisions at every level of society, from personal choices to state policy. While philosophers like Socrates and Plato expressed skepticism about the epistemological value of oracular pronouncements, they acknowledged the oracle's powerful role in shaping the moral and political landscape of the Greek world. Oracles were thus both revered and questioned, seen as essential mediators between the human and divine, but also as institutions whose authority was open to philosophical critique. Their sustained importance across regions and times showcases the deep interconnection between religion, politics, and thought in ancient Greece, leaving a lasting imprint on the philosophical discourse of the era.